Hi all, and welcome to part 2 of the Deploy to AWS ECR's course. In this video, we're going to set up SSH keys, set up a GitHub repository, we're going to create a Docker file, we're going to set up a basic node server using simple server, I think it's called, in NPM. And then we're going to learn to rebuild the Docker containers so that if we change code in the folder structure, then it automatically gets rebuilt into a new container. A lot of this you may already know. I don't know who's watching, so I'm just going to go from the beginning. Feel free to skip this entire video if you've already got an application that you need to deploy and you've already done all the hard work. The one thing I will say that if you do want to skip this, then just make sure that your Docker container is exposing port 80, because that's going to cause problems later on when we use fargate with ECS. So make sure you do that. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. So the first thing we want to do is open up a WSL2 terminal. You can do this by right-clicking the standard Windows icon and clicking Ubuntu. So this will bring up the terminal. And the next thing we want to type is node-v, followed by npm-v, followed by docker-v. This will ensure that we have all of the right versions installed. So as you can see, we're using version 16 of Node, version 8 of npm, and Docker version 23. So that's right for this video. The next thing we want to do is add an SSH key. So we type in ssh-keygen space -t space ed25519, which is the name of the encryption type, -C, and then in quotes put an email address. For this example, I've used brad@example. We also want to make sure that we save it to the right directory. So my directory for SSH keys is in the home directory in the folder .ssh, which is a hidden folder. So I've saved it as id_test, and I've entered my passphrase, and now it's generated my private key and my public key. So to see the public key, we can use the cat command, followed by a squiggly line /.sh/id_test.pub. Squiggly line indicates it's the home directory, which is in /home/brad. And as you can see there, we have our public key. So if you go ahead and copy that entire line and save it to your clipboard, we can use it in a minute. But first, we want to start the SSH agent and add the key to it. So to do that, we type in eval $$ open bracket ssh-agent space -s close bracket, close speech mark. And then we add our key to the running agent by running ssh-add space squiggly line /.sh/id_test. And we also need to enter our passphrase for the SSH key that we set earlier. So essentially what this does is it prevents you from having to keep typing in your password for your SSH key every time that you do a git pull or a git push. So it's more of a convenience than anything else. So the next thing we need to do is set up the SSH key in GitHub. So go to your profile and go to SSH and GPG keys on the left and click New SSH key. And you can give it any title you want. In this example, we're going to use test key. And the code that we had on our clipboard, we're going to paste that into the key. And you may need to enter your authentication code if you have 2FA set up, which you definitely should. So the code that you paste into that key text area, I know it went a little quickly, is the one that we copied earlier from the .pub file. And as you can see, it's now added to our GitHub SSH keys. And I blurred out the other ones for safety and security. The next thing we need to do is create a test repository to put all of our server stuff into. So we're going to go to the create new repository from the profile page. Give it a name, we're going to call it test, and make sure you click the option to add a README file before you create so that it initializes the repo. So now that that's created, we can copy the clone SSH URL. And if we go back to our terminal, you want to make sure that you're in the right directory. You can go to any directory that you choose. I'm going to go into my predefined Linux WSL2 projects folder, which is in /mnt/c/users/brads/linux/projects. And to clone the GitHub repo to this location, we type in git clone space and paste in the SSH URL that we copied from the GitHub repo page. And then we can do a cd into a new folder and do an ls to list all of the files. And we should have the README file in there as well. Next is to initialize npm into the repo. So we type in npm space init and just keep pressing enter until it comes up with the is this okay message, and then type yes to confirm. So all this does is creates a package.json file in the root directory. Now we need to save our server package of choice, which is going to be simple-server. So the full command is npm i-save simple-server. And as you can see there, it's now installed. So in order to test that this is working, we need to modify our package.json file using Vim. And we're going to go to the scripts section and create two new scripts, one called dev and one called start. The dev one is used for local development, and the start one will eventually be used inside our Docker container when we get to it. So in the dev script, we want to type in simple-server, public, and 3000. Public is the name of the folder that we're going to start the server in, and 3000 is the port number. The start command is identical, except we're using port 80 instead of port 3000. I'll explain that later. So if we do npm run dev, you can see we've got an error. I stupidly didn't put the comma at the end of the test script that was instantiated by npm. So we're going to go and add that comma now. Save the file with :wq and try and run npm run dev again. And hopefully we should see a nice message. Okay, so we don't have the public folder installed, so we're going to install that now using mkdir space public. And we're going to create a index.html file in the public folder. And we're just going to put a simple message to test it as working. And then we're going to type npm run dev again. And I already have another server running on port 3000, so it's intelligently worked out that and created the port on 3001 instead. So you probably don't have anything running on port 3000, but I do. So don't be like me. So if we open up a browser and go to localhost :3001, we'll now see our index.html file is served up via the server. So this is now working. Next is to create a Docker file. So we type in vim space Docker file, and that has a capital D on it. And if you want the code for this, I'll put the links in the description below. But I'll also run through each of the commands line by line, just to explain what each one does. So from node 16 Alpine is the base image, which is just a very basic node version. Work directory is where the app is going to get installed to. And then we run copy ... to copy all of the files, including the package.json and the public folders. And we run npm ci to install the files exactly as they are in the lock file. And we expose port 80, which is where eventually this is going to be running on our AWS ECS. And then we run cmd npm run start to start the entry point for the Docker file. we can test this is working by running docker space build space full stop for the root directory -t test. -t test is the name of the container, so it doesn't keep on making brand new containers every time that we build. So you can see here that it's all built correctly and there's no errors in any of the script files. So to make things easier, we can create a docker compose.yml file. What this will do is essentially tie together different containers, but in this instance we only have one container, so it's not really worth doing it for this, but it does make things easier when you want to rebuild and run them on the right ports rather than remembering the Docker commands. So again, you can paste this from the link in the description below, and we're just going to change the port to 3001 as we have an application already running on port 3000, but it's entirely up to you what you do. So to run this, we do docker space compose space up, and all this does is ties the container build to a service which is running on port 3001. And if we open up a browser, we should be able to see that. To confirm that this is working, what we can do is if we cancel this by doing Control-C, we can do -- build at the end in order to rebuild the container. So what we're going to do here is change the index.html file to an update has occurred on the end of the file, and we're going to do docker compose up -- build. This will rebuild the container with the new files and start the service. And then we can open up the browser and test that that text has changed. There we go. You'll also notice that it says that it's using port 80, which is the container port, and mapping it to 3001 on the host port, which is your machine. The final thing we need to do is commit this to our GitHub repository. So if we type in git status, we can see all of the files that are ready to be staged. But if you see there, we have node_modules folder. We don't want to commit that because it's too big. So if we create a .gitignore file, we can add node module / to it. And now if we type in git status again, we can see that it's not there. So we've omitted that from GitHub, essentially. So in order to stage these, we do git add full stop, and then do git commit -m, and in speech marks write a message to explain what you've done in that commit. As you can see there, it's committed all those files, and if we do git push, we should now see all of those file changes in the repo that we created. There we go.